So today I wanted to go over the most basic example of a state machine. I feel like this is like the hello world of state machine, which is the light switch. Reason for that is the light switch, you can only have two states, right? Super simple. It's either going to be in the on state or off state, right? I feel like this is the best way to get into state machine. So I wanted to get started off here. We're going to go over a Boolean version, right? And then I want to refactor that into a proper X state machine. I'll show you how to wire that up using solid.js. And finally, at the end, use the X state solid package, which will make everything super nice and super clean for us. Now, when I think about doing this in vanilla JS, right? For me, just thinking about this, what do I need to keep track of, right? So we know that we're going to have to keep track of a on state, right? So we're going to do something like let is on, and we're going to set it to false. And we also need to keep track of the count. We're going to set that to 0. We got to go ahead and grab these elements from the DOM to actually do, an update to the UI. Now that we know that we have access to the button, we can go ahead and start incrementing, right? So we need to go ahead and do add an event listener. So we'll do that. And we're going to listen on click. Then we're going to provide a callback function. And then this is where we want to update the state, right? So we're going to grab that is on state, the variable, and we're going to set that to the opposite of what it currently is. We're going to do is on. Then the count, we need to go ahead and increment this, right? So we'll do a nice little plus plus there and it'll increment. The next thing we need to do is we need to make sure that the text on the button is also toggling. We need to make sure that it's going from off to on. We're going to go ahead and do button. We'll grab the text content and we'll do is on. If it is on, we want this to display on. Otherwise, we will display off. And now let's see if this works. Yeah, perfect. So you can see that the label for the button is now going between on and off. So the next thing we want to do is we need to grab that count label and we're going to do the same thing. We'll use a template little and we have it set to toggled. And in here, we'll provide it the count. Cool. So let's see if this works. So you can see here that the count is going up by 1 every time that we toggle the button. Cool. Now, what does this actually look like in a state chart? We're going to go and use Stately AI. They have X state visualizer that we can use where it'll show you all of the states in your application. So here you go. Now, again, what are the two states that a light switch can possibly be in? We have the on state and we have the, did I say on? The on state and the off state. Now, what's causing the state to transition from on to off and off to on is that flip, is that toggle. So we need to define that event. We go connect this on state to the off state, and you'll see here that it's event 1, but we're going to name this flip, right? Because this is the flip of the switch. And then we need to go ahead and do the same thing for the off state back to the on state. Now, another cool thing about the X state visualizer is that you can actually go in here after you've already defined your state chart or you're, developing and you're building it up. You can go in here and use the simulate feature, which is really nice because it'll show you what state it'll currently be in, right? So you can see here, initially we're on the on state. Now, if we click this flip toggle, you can see that we're now on the off state, and the same thing in the opposite direction. If we click flip, we're going to go right back to on, right? So it's a really cool thing that they have. You get to see that live. Now, what does this look like in X state? You can go in here and you can take a look at the actual code, which is also a nice feature. You can come in here after you've defined your state charts, your state machines. You can just copy and paste this into your application and use it right away. So what I like to do, I like to use TypeScript. I like to make sure that my types are properly set up. Xstate v5 was updated with really great support for TypeScript. So I highly recommend use v5 version. So that's what I'm going to use here. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to go back to the workspace that I have created. We're going to create a new file. We're going to call this toggle machine .ts. Now we know how the state machine works because we saw it in that simulation. We saw the state chart. We saw all of the different states. We saw the flip event, and there's only 2 states that our state machine can possibly be in. That's the beautiful thing about state charts, is you can see explicitly the states that you have in your system. So there's no weird edge cases that should come up because you already defined all of your state transitions in your system, right? So again, we look at this and we see we have a flip that's going from the on state back to off, the off state back to on. That's it. Super simple. The only thing that's missing here is the count. The Boolean version, we were incrementing the count and we were also updating the on state, right? Either off or on. Now we need to do something similar here. We need to come into this context. So that's where our values for the business logic lives, right? This is where we're going to keep track of the count. So what we're going to do here, you can see up here where our types are defined, we can provide that. We'll say count is a number, okay? And you notice now we're getting a TypeScript error because the count is not provided to the machine. So we'll go in here and give it a count of 0. Now, what we need to do is we need to increment that count. Now, how do we do that with xstate? So xstate has this helper function that we can use. It's called assign. This is what we use to update the context of the state machine. And we'll see how that works. So when we go and make a transition, right? Whenever we go and we get that flip, we're going to target this off state. And what we need to do is we need to increment, right? So we're going to provide it actions. So what do we want to happen on this state transition? For this action, we want to increment. And we're going to do the same thing for the opposite. So when we're in the off state, transition back to on, we need to also increment. Cool. Now this is giving me an error because, let's see. Oh, right. We need to define what is increment. What does that actually mean, right? So in here within our setup function, underneath our types, we can go in here and define those actions for the state machine. So we go in here and we'll define increments. And now increment, we will pass that assign function. And we will target this count. And we want to update the previous count, right? So we need to go ahead and grab the context. And we're going to increment this by 1, right? I believe that's it. That's all we need. It may seem like a bit more setup for this simple logic of just, toggling on and off. But I am a big fan because, again, like, yeah, we can go in the direction of using Booleans, and that's fine for a simple example like this. But very quickly, you end up with code where you're having to keep track of all of the different variables, all of the different states across your application, especially if you're working with multiple developers, it can get pretty messy. If you define your state machine up front, you can then provide that state chart to all of the developers, everyone, even management on your team, and everyone will be aligned with how that application should be running, how it should be working. What I'm going to do is we're going to go back to the index.html, and instead of using that simple toggle, we're going to go and wire this up with solid.js. So what I'm going to do here is that we're going to style this to make this look nice for us. If you want, the code is available. You guys can take a look at this. All right. So how does this look like using solid.js? How do we get the state machine to work with solid.js? Now, if you take a look at the screen here, I'm importing this light bulb icon, and I just want to make this demo look a little nicer than just a button with the on-off labels and a count, right? So I'm going to style this nicely for you guys. The main thing is we're going to go ahead and create these elements now. Okay. And then let's see, is this actually working for us? We should just be seeing a light bulb. Okay, cool. So we have the light bulb on the UI. Next thing we need to do is we need to get the state and the count, right? And we have to provide the actual toggle, the button. So what we need to do now is we need to wire up our UI to use the state chart, to use the state machine that we just defined, right? So what we're going to do here, I'm going to go into this hooks directory and I'm going to create my own custom hook, grab xstate and wire this all up with solid.js. So we're going to call this the use toggle actor CS. We need to import a few things. Then we can start defining this. We're going to export this function, which is called use toggle actor. And then in here, we're going to create the actor. So we're going to use this create actor and we're going to pass it that toggle machine. So now think about this. The toggle machine is just the blueprint, right? It's just the blueprint of your logic. What we're doing here is we're grabbing that state machine definition and we're passing it into this create actor function that we get from xstate. So after this, we need to go ahead and we're going to set the state. We need to use a create signal from solid. And what we're doing here is we're just going to get the snapshot. And what this is it's grabbing the snapshot of the actor. It's basically the state. What's the context? So it's grabbing all of that and we're passing this to the signal. Okay. And we're going to have to start the actor. We have to tell the actor to start. As soon as it mounts, as soon as this function gets called, we have to start the actor, right? Then we're going to create a subscription. So we're going to subscribe to the actor and we're going to look at the next state. And what we're doing here is we're just going to set that state. Whatever the next state that the actor gives us, we're just going to go ahead and set that for our signal. And that's what's going to cause the re-render for the UI, right? We also need to do cleanup. And in here, we want to unsubscribe. We want to unsubscribe from the actor, and we also want to make sure that the actor has stopped. So subscription, unsubscribe, and the actor, we're going to tell it to stop. Okay, we're going to do a send, and we will just return that states and send. Cool. We wired this up. We wired up the toggle machine. We're creating an actor and we're subscribing to that actor. Anytime the actor changes state, which is from an event, right? When we send an event to the state machine, that's going to cause a state transition, which we're now subscribed to. And then in that subscription, we're going to set the state for solid.js to re-render the UI, right? We need to go in here and actually use that custom hook, right? So now we see here, TypeScript is already set up for us. You can see if we use the send function, the only event that we can use is this event type of flip. The state itself is also keeping track of the count. Yeah, and it shows you the ID, the initial state, the states, lovely. Okay. So the next thing that we need to do here is we need to go and update the UI. Yeah. So like right now, nothing is happening. The div that's wrapping the light bulb, we're going to go ahead and use a class list. And in this class list, there are going to be an on and an off, right? And what we're going to do here is we're going to say on is going to be true if the state matches on, right? And we are also going to do one for off. Oh, right. So in solid.js, you got to make sure that you're invoking these. So state is an actual function itself. Okay. And then what else do we need to do here? So for the state label, we need to grab the state of the state machine. Is it on the on state or are we on the off state? Right. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to use a string. We're going to say this is just the state.value, whatever that is. Again, we need to call states. right? And then the same thing for count. Now remember, for count, it's a little different though. It's not a state of the state machine. It's the context. It's the count is in the context. So we need to go in here and we will use toggled. And then here we're going to grab the state.context, and you'll see here, TypeScript set up nice for us. Get that count. Cool. And the very last thing that we need to do is we need to send that event to the state machine. Okay. Instead of console logging click, we need to send this to the actor. So that's what we're going to do here next. You're going to send the type of event, which is flip. Now let's see if this works for us. Nice. So we defaulted the state machine to on, and then we flip it to off, right? So let's go back into the state machine. Yeah, so the initial state was actually set to on. That's why the light was on. But if we wanted to, we can set this to off. Cool. And now you come in here, you toggle, the count gets updated, gets incremented by 1. The state label gets updated, and the light bulb is also updating as well. Now let's take this a step further. I don't want to have to manually wire up a custom hook to get XState, create the signal, you do the unmount, do the cleanup. XState actually has a package that we can use that removes all of this for us. It abstracts that away for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the app TSX, and instead of using this use toggle actor, all we're going to do here is we're going to change this up, and we're going to call this use actor function. So we'll go ahead and call this use actor, and we're going to pass in that toggle machine that we defined. So we can go ahead and remove this. And now, instead of having to call these as functions, we can remove that, and it still works. So XState solid does that for us under the hood, right? Which is lovely. We don't have to create custom hooks to wire that up, which is really nice. So, I mean, if you think about it, all we have to do now is just define our toggle machine, which is this here, right? Once that's defined, we just take this blueprint and we pass that over to the use actor function, and that's it. We're good to go. Look at look at this. This is pretty clean. In my opinion, this is very, very clean. It's very easy. I like to keep my UI dumb, right? Where there's no business logic in my component. All of the logic is now in my state machine, is in my state chart. And the beautiful thing about it is we can share that state chart with other people on our team, technical and non-technical. They can just look at the chart and they can see all of the states that your application can be in, right? Which makes this super, super lovely. That's pretty much it for today. Like this, leave me a like, subscribe.